So we got legendary matchmaker Ron Katz, ITRBoxing. If you don't know who he is, well, you probably don't know much about the boxing business or boxing world. Thank you for being on. But what's going on with you? I saw you put out a tweet about Bernard Hopkins. You made his first match. You made his last match. The first fight he had, he lost. I take it you like Joe's chances in this fight.
Yeah, Bernard has fought for me a few times when I was during the Top Rank days. His pro debut was with a kid named Clinton Mitchell, who was a New York Golden Glove champ. Bernard had just come out of prison and lost a very close decision in a good fight. Clinton Mitchell never fought after that. He was diagnosed with diabetes and had to give it up and passed away some years ago, unfortunately. So Bernard fought a few more fights for us, and then I made Roy Jones and Bernard for the vacant IBF title, and that was at RFK Stadium. And it wasn't a very good fight. Neither guy really took the initiative. There was much too much respect on both sides. But Roy, did just enough to come away with a pretty clear-cut decision. And now in his retirement fight, he's fighting my young lion, Joe Smith, who just knocked out Andres Fonfera on NBC in one round. It shocked everybody doing it, except those of us who were pretty confident of him going in thinking he could do it. So I think he bit off a lot more than he could chew on this one. He's going to be in for a shock, Bernard, and I firmly believe that Joe will be the first guy to stop Bernard, the great Bernard Hopkins, in his legendary career.
Because when I got the press release yesterday, I gotta say the first thing I thought was, if you're an older guy, you're slowing down, you don't want to be in there with a legit puncher. And I don't know a lot about Joe Smith, but I know he's a puncher. He's got about 14 knockouts with 20 fights.
Well, actually, he's 22-1 with 18 knockouts.
Oh, so that's even worse.
Yeah, and in one loss, he was well on the way to winning, but suffered a devastating, multiple broken jaw injury. This is before we had him, and they just wouldn't let him continue. I mean, he was fighting with it, but they did stop the fight, I think, after the fourth round of a fight that he was winning, easily. But unfortunate, the one blemish. But look, Bernard, took on another tough, aggressive, strong, hard-punching guy in his last fight, which was in 2014 in Sergey Kovalev, and we all saw what happened there. It wasn't a pretty sight. So I don't know what he's thinking, why he chose Joe, because here he is 2 years later, inactive, older. I guess in his own mind he thinks he still has enough of the wit and guile to frustrate a kid like Joe Smith and win a decision over him. But I think it's a very tall task for him, I really do. With all due respect to him and his career, which was a Hall of Fame career, obviously.
The thing that stood out to me is that 12th round with Kovalev. That's damage that doesn't get fixed,
No, and listen, Kovalev took the foot off the gas in that fight. If he wanted to, he would have stopped Bernard, without question. And I believe he'll be the first one to tell you that. Maybe both of them will tell you that. So, I mean, Joe's a good fighter. Joe is not just a puncher. He has some fairly decent technique. He has a very, very good jab. Goes to the body very well. He's pretty active with his hands. Defensively, he's not bad. Not great, but not bad. So he's a bit of a all-around fighter, that has tremendous punching power. So that makes him a very dangerous man.
So he's a guy that a lot of people could sell real short, without knowing much about him. They could just look at the record.
Yeah, I don't think, listen, after the Fonfera fight, I think people realize, wow, this guy's a legit puncher. So anytime regardless of the ability of the fighter, you have a real puncher, who can, put your lights out with one shot. Those are the kind of guys that the eyeballs stay stuck on the screen. They don't move. They're dangerous guys. But Joe is just, like I said, more than just a puncher. So we'll see on December 17th. Hey, maybe Bernard can reach into his bag of tricks and pull one out of the hat, but, I don't see it happening.
How about, who else have you been making? Because, I wanted to ask some questions about just, the methodology of making a match, but who else do you have that you've matched up some bouts for lately?
Well, Demetrius Andrade, who, in my opinion, is probably one of the top 5 most talented fighters in the world today. Problem is, excuse me, the problem is he's just not active enough. But when he is, the skills that he displays are very unique, and there aren't too many fighters around that can match those skills. And this is a guy, who, has long lapses in between fights. So, if he gets on an active schedule, there will be nobody, and I mean nobody, from 154 to 160, including Golovkin, that will hang with this guy. He's that good, in my opinion.
I'm real big on Boo Boo. I think that he might be the best out. That's how high on him is, because I think Willie Nelson's a guy.
Listen.
Oh, go ahead.
No. I mean, you're right, and I don't say it, because he's under our banner. I look at a fighter and analyze and give an opinion, and again, the talent is almost unmatched. It's there. It's just, the outside distractions and things like that are preventing him from becoming a true superstar, which he has the ability to become. And we're hopeful that things have been straightened out and he will be on the road to becoming that superstar.
And
so, we will see.
As an outside observer, another thing that I notice is you look at the big network players, and it's mainly Top Rank, and it's Heyman, and to a lesser extent Golden Boy. If your guy isn't in-house with them, there's less of an incentive to bring in a guy that 80% chance beats your guy. That's kind of how I look at it too.
Yeah, but taking the Heyman factor out of the equation, which is hard to do, almost impossible, but becoming more realistic as time goes on. If you have a fighter that can command the kind of dollars that networks will pay, it makes it much more attractive to potential opponents. Like back in the day with Marvin Hagler, there was enough money to attract guys like the John Mugabes of the world to come in and fight him. Even though they may not have wanted to, and know going in, hey, this is going to be a tall task. So it's sort of the same principle with a guy like Demetrius, but he has to establish himself as being the guy, the man.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. So he's going over to Germany to fight this guy. Don't know much about him.
Yeah, Jack Colquet. He's one of the WBA champions. Solid kid, tries like hell. I'm sure, he'll be there, well conditioned, but again, the skill level is night and day.
So
I see it as another Brian Rose type fight where Brian was very game, did the best he could, which is all you can ask out of any fighter, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't enough to even compete.
No, I hear what you're saying. Are those kind of like the two guys you're working with right now, Joe Smith?
Well, we have a whole roster of guys. I mean, obviously Chris Algieri, who I don't have to go into. Cletus Selden, another Joe Smith type junior welterweight from Long Island, who can just knock walls down with his power. Who's a truly exciting fighter. A take no prisoners type of fighter, an Arturo Gatti type fighter with more power. So if network dates do become available, he appeared on ESPN once before Friday Night Fights went away. He main evented destroying, Johnny Garcia, who was 21-1 at the time, I believe. Selden, a Jewish kid. There ain't too many of them around. He's a real fan-friendly type fighter with an unbelievable personality, funny as crap, very intelligent. I mean, if things straighten out in this business, he could become a real star. He really can. So, we're very high on him. And then we have, some of the stalwarts that have been around, for ages, like Joshua Cloudy, Calvin Rodriguez, who's coming off a win. I have a bunch of young kids who, unfortunately, right now, because of the situation in New York with the insurance, are on hold until hopefully that gets straightened out.
Let's get into that, because I'm from California. I'm not from New York, but I love club shows. I love seeing guys develop. I think that the club show level is like the amateur boxing system. It's a part of boxing that needs to exist. How the heck do young New York fighters get enough fights to get signed by anyone or build up?
Well, right now it's not going to happen. But prior to this, I mean, we've run over the past 3.5 years, 20, 25, 26 shows at our home base of the Paramount in Huntington, Long Island, and developed an unbelievable club, sort of along the lines of the Blue Horizon and Knights World back in the days in total, where we can develop kids like Chris Algieri, Emmanuel Taylor, Cletus Selden, Joe Smith, and a bunch of my other younger kids coming up, like Tyrone James, Terrell Bostic, Danny Gonzalez, a very exciting 12-0 junior welterweight. But now, because of this ridiculous implementation of insurance rule for a traumatic brain injury, boxing has ceased in the state of New York, which is the first time, and I did the research on this, since 1880 that there have been no scheduled fights in the state of New York in the months of September, October, November. You have to go all the way back to there.
And what was the cause for this? Was it Pritchard Cologne? Was it the UFC coming into New York? Like, I've heard all this different stuff.
Well, obviously, all of this, the original point was from the Abdulamov injury, Magomed injury, the unfortunate injury and the way it was handled. But some of it, in my opinion, has to do with, the UFC coming in, because, you can't say MMA, because there's tons of guys who can promote smaller MMA shows in the state of New York. But now they can't, because they can't afford the insurance, just like us boxing promoters. So, I think a lot of concessions were made to the UFC. And, we'll see what happens when it all comes out. From what I'm told, there are, multiple investigations happening right now into everything that, went around all of this. And we'll see if anything becomes of it. But more importantly, we're hoping something is done sooner than later by the state of New York to get boxing back on the map, because, New York has always been the richest state as far as the history in the sport of boxing. And, you're depriving tons and tons of young kids from earning a living, the promoters, the local venues, the merchants, the hotels, and so on and so forth. So something needs to be done, and done quickly. It's a very regrettable situation right now.
I live in Northern California, and most people would think when you say California, they think L.A., but I'm the opposite of L.A., and we get about, maybe if we're lucky, 4 cards a year. And I just see how hard that is for local guys who have talent. It's hard for them to not want to become a glass seller or a car mechanic or sell insurance, because it's not financially feasible, or they have to travel and be an opponent. and I fear that could happen in New York.
Well, it's a little different because, there's a lot of options for those kids, to go downstate and fight in Southern California, the middle of the state, wherever they're running shows. New York, they can't go anywhere. It's not like, well, this is just in the in Manhattan, New York City. It's throughout the whole state. So in order for these kids to stay busy, essentially, it's correct what you said, they have to go out of state to get fights. And if we're not promoting a show, let's say at Mohegan Sun or Atlantic City or Pennsylvania or wherever outside the state of New York, we don't want to send our kids into hostile territory, because 9 out of 10 times you're going to come back with an L on the record.
Even if, like, as anyone that knows the boxing business, even if you win the fight, if you go into hostile territory, you never know what's going to happen.
Of course not. You can win the fight and not win the fight. That's the nature of the sport.
Yeah.
Listen, we sent Luis Franco out to California to fight Carlos Morales. I thought he won fairly convincingly, as did a lot of other people. Now, he gave the impression, which was unfortunate, of not winning the fight by the way he fought, which was more defensive and counter-punching and doing things like that. But he lost the decision. But again, many thought he won the fight. But, that's not maybe a really good example because, he gave the impression of not being the winner, and that happens. You can be the winner, but give the impression to the judges that you're not the winner, and they'll score it for the other guy.
Yeah, I mean...
And that's what happened with Franco. But, I mean, You see a lot of guys go out of town and come up short on decisions. That's nothing new. That's ancient in our sport.
Well, I tell people, if you ever get the chance to be near the ring, look at the judges. Because a lot of people think there's all this corruption and stuff. If you look at the judges, a lot of them are substitute teachers. They're people that took like a martial arts class and they don't really have a lot going on. Nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying not all judges. But a lot of times you have people that aren't the most trained or informed people watching fights when it counts.
That's because boxing is not a uniform sport such as baseball, basketball, football, and hockey, where their officials are even though they do work in the off season, there is no off season in boxing, so they are paid a salary for their time when they are officiating. And there are many, many, many fine judges, but probably more incompetent ones. And the natural perception of those who may be a casual viewer of the sport, it's fixed. Boxing is fixed. It's not fixed. Most of these decisions are due to incompetency. Not that somebody was paid off. That doesn't happen anymore. Hasn't for years and years and years.
Yeah, I mean, I've been seated next to a judge where I scored a fight 4-0, and I heard the judge say, I think it's a draw. And I don't want to hear a judge say that. I don't want to hear a judge say, I think. You should be definitive what you know,
Yeah, and then you got to worry about a judge if he says, I think.
You know what I mean? Like, I think it was this.
If he's not, strong in his views of his opinion, then he shouldn't be judging.
Yeah, it's like I saw a boxing
and the
coach.
same with referees. Same thing applies to them.
So, I got a question. How do you go about matchmaking? How do you go about, like, okay, I'm going to put together a fight. I got Joe Smith. How do you approach it, like, when you're looking at the fights?
Well, when we have an event scheduled, we know who we want on from our roster. We usually leave a couple spots open for maybe non-roster fighters that might be ticket sellers or people looking for fights that I can make good deals with and good fights. And I go out and do my research and try to get the most competitive guys for my guys, who will teach my guys something, and at the same time give forth an effort where the fans are entertained. And for my 40 years plus, I've been fortunate enough to be able to do that. You know, there's been a lot of bumps in the road, a lot of guys who should have won, haven't won, but, you know, that happens. But for the most part, you know, that's the secret. You know, to get guys who are going to perform, to give the fans their money worth, yet give your guy a good enough fight where he may learn something, and your guy be successful in that fight. And those basically are the keys to matchmaking.
So if I'm hearing it right, like, so say maybe you got a 7-0 guy, he's on a world title track. You might go, okay, it's time to give him a southpaw. And then we're going to give him, after that, maybe a guy that fights like Salido. You give him, but they have, like, maybe not the best records, but they've got stylistic elements that he might see at the world level.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times on these type of shows, if they're not televised, I ignore the records as long as they're passable by the commission, if they're qualified. I mean, you know, there's guys, and like you said, maybe I want my guy to fight a southpaw, and my guy may be 7-0, and the southpaw may be 6-10. But I look at who the 10 losses are against, how he performed in those fights, how many times he was stopped in those fights, and then determine that he may be a good enough opponent where my fighter is going to really pick up things he hasn't seen before, and his opponent will make a good enough fight that the crowd will be entertained by it. And that's the key. You know, it doesn't always work out, but, you know, that's what I try to do. And, you know, I think I've had as much success over that period of time than anybody, really. I mean, you know, there's guys like Russell Peltz and Don Chargan and Bruce Trampler that have done the same, you know, but, you know, there's very, very, very few of us that have that ability to do something like that.
Well, Don Chargan lives about 20 minutes from my house. So I've been going to his shows for about 8 years now. So that's a nice name to hear be brought up.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, Don's a legend, as is Russell, as Bruce. I mean, you know, Bruce brought me into Top Rank in 1980, beginning of 1980, the end of 1985. So,
no, I hear you there.
Those are the creme de la creme.
Yeah, it's always interesting because I always hear fans always talk about maybe they want like the best matchups at all times, but I tell people even like if a guy fights a really good fighter, you don't want him just to fight another really good fighter. He needs a bounce back fight before you take another hard fight. There's kind of like an art to matchmaking, I feel like. And I don't really say I understand it, but I can appreciate it, and I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to see the rubric. But it's not...
Yeah, but it's not so much, you know, it is the fights, you know, I have no problem with guys fighting hard fight after hard fight, you know, I mean, and look at the roster of fighters Chris Algieri fought, from Emmanuel Taylor to Ruslan Provodnikov to Manny Pacquiao to Amir Khan. Then, you know, he's supposed to get a breather with Eric Monet, who you know, who's a tough kid, no tune-up type kid, and then Errol Spence. So, but it's not necessarily the hard fight. It's what you do in the gym outside of the fight. Are you sparring hard, preparing for a fight every day for 5 days a week? That's the stuff that wears and tears on you, not the fight itself. And I think if there were old-time trainers around, they would tell you the same thing. Not too many of the new ones, you know, are keen enough to understand that. But if you're going into war in the gym every day for 5 days a week, going 6, 8 rounds, whatever it may be, what's it going to take out of your body? Common sense.
Well, I'll go even one step further. I'll say, how about not even sparring? What if you're just working really hard, doing weight training, CrossFit, you jog 7 miles every day, You just
Yeah,
go.
whatever you may be doing outside of when you actually fight. I mean, and that's, unfortunately what happened to Muhammad Ali. Muhammad in the fights, he had some hard fights, yeah, but, he barely got touched in the fights. But in the gym, he used to let guys pound on him day after day, year after year. And unfortunately, it took its toll on him, as it does a lot of other fighters.
Who do you think, in all your years of being in the boxing business, who was the most efficient boxer with his training?
Sugar Ray Leonard. Case closed. And the best I ever saw. I saw Ali at the end. I was around him at the end. But Ray Leonard, for me, nobody even close.
Why? That's the follow-up, is just why.
Because, one, the intelligence he had both inside the ring and outside were unmatched. The skill level, he could do it all. Was unmatched. He can box. He can punch. He could counterpunch. He could fight defensively if he wanted. He had a good chin. He had it all, which made him, so special during his prime. Duran's another one, although Duran, was a different kind of a trainer than I think Ray was more intelligent with his gym, or Duran, I would guess was a guy who worked hard both in the gym and in the ring, during his prime, is another example. But Ray to me, for the era of, the 70s on, there's nobody that comes close.
When you look at boxing right now, take out your guy Boo Boo, who I think is one of the future stars of boxing. When you look at this new wave of people, who do you see as the next generation? The guys that are gonna, in 5-6 years, they're at the top of the business.
Well, listen, Errol Spence certainly looks like he has all the tools to become a formidable guy in the ring, and one that's going to be very, very tough to beat. He's a U.S. Olympian. He seems like a nice kid, a clean-cut guy. If he develops a little more charisma and relates a little more to the casual sports fan, he could be a real star, that kid, because he certainly can flat-out fight.
See, that's interesting, because when I first saw Earl, all I could think is he gets hit a little bit too much. But every single person that's smart and knows boxing tells me this answer. So I'm seeing it now, but I just started going along with it, because if everyone I say knows the boxing business or works in it says Earl, I'm missing something. That's the way I've been looking.
Well, he's always was very capable, but he's steadily improved fight after fight, and that's what you look for. Little things. Maybe a little thing, like something he's doing with his feet, with his body, turning a certain way. And every fight he's gotten better and better and better and better. And he did something to Algieri that nobody has even come close to doing. So,
I
give him a lot of credit for that.
Gotta play devil's advocate on the Algieri one. Do you think that when Algieri went to John David Jackson, his style changed a little bit, where he wasn't as elusive?
It was night and day, but listen, I'm the guy that recommended John, and I approved the move, and I think it was a good move, but Chris, might be one of the biggest overachievers, in the last 30, 40 years. And, should hold his head high for his accomplishment. The Errol Spence fight, I don't think he was mentally there. I think he had issues, and it affected his performance, and I think he'd be the first to tell you that. Not that the result might have been different, but it might have been a little more competitive. So, Chris has done just fine for himself. Believe me, I tell you, he's done fine for himself.
Well, I always think back to the Ruslan fight when HBO, it felt like they were all against Chris, and he was beating the brakes off of Provodnikov, and they were acting like Provodnikov was running away with the fight. I mean, that was probably one of the weirdest.
Everybody has an opinion, just like when you sit on a toilet.
But
everybody has one of those too. So but that's it.
I just feel like when you said that, like, he overachieved. I mean, I feel like that kind of was the capstone of Algieri. It's almost like the perception being told to you is he's losing the fight, and then he comes from behind and wins. He's the constant underdog.
Well, you know what, and that affects a lot of viewers who may be casual viewers. If they're listening to a sportscaster, and that could be for any sport, they're going to be influenced. So, I mean, that's just the nature of it, but it is what it is. And that's it. And that's all I got for you, pal.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. I appreciate it, man.
All right, now, it was my pleasure anytime. I can help you with anything. Feel free to call me.
Okay, well, I just appreciate legends like yourself allowing me the opportunity to talk to you.
Stop with the legend. I'm just a guy that enjoys doing what he's doing. Well, used to enjoy doing what he's doing. Now, it's just a job.
Okay, well, I appreciate you.
All right, Lukey. Take care, pal.
Okay.